if it was just that DirecTV and Roku had dropped RT and that was the reason, although I agree with you, that doesn't sound plausible. Even if that was the reason, those who are arguing that that's just like, oh, the free marketplace, said no to RT, that's still a form of censorship. Like deplatforming is still a form of censorship. And those companies did that under extreme pressure and like
Yeah.
letter writing campaigns and lobbying. So even for those people, because I saw some people making the argument that if that's really why RT America shut down, it's not censorship. It absolutely is. Um,
You mean like this guy?
yeah,
Uh,
so actually, like I like Matt Binder. I know him and I like him, but yeah, I just disagree with him here. I saw him say that and I was like, dude, like that is a form of censorship. That absolutely is a
And
form of censorship.
and it's just false. Like as if the network found out people didn't like them and just shut down everything
Well,
in the span of 1 hour. Like, oh, I guess people don't like it.
right, right, right. And then
Just for our listeners, Ronnie, let me read the tweet just so people
oh
who
yeah,
don't
yeah,
end
yeah,
up
of
watching
course.
can hear. He said, "Do people not realize RT America wasn't banned or censored? Why are they talking like it was?" Continue.
Yeah. Well, so I just wanted to say also just to Lee's like theory about the why it's I mean, had it been the just being removed from certain platforms, then you would have seen all the various RT divisions and as well as Sputnik across not just RT America, but you would have seen RT in Europe and the various and then like RT International shut down as well, but you didn't see that happen. So actually I do think that eventually we'll find out probably more about why this happened. But there is something to be said about the fact that we know RT America was forced to register as a foreign agent
Yeah.
a few years back under like the crazy atmosphere of Russiagate.
The first
And
ever
we,
media outlet to be forced to do that.
Well,
right, which,
I,
yeah. And then we also know that the Justice Department has not relented in their ongoing attack on RT America as well as other outlets in the US. We just don't see it or hear about it in the media. But it will be interesting to find out why this decision was made when it was, because you're also right that a lot of these various outlets whether it's RT America or RT International or Rupley or Redfish or Mafic, which I used to work for. All of these outlets have budgets for like 6 months to a year. So
Yeah.
even if it was the issue of sanctions, it wouldn't happen overnight like this. And I just wanted to make that comment, but I'm sure
Yeah,
Kevin, yeah.
and just real quick for people who don't know what I do and never heard of my stuff, it's a comedy news show, but it brought in, it's anti-imperialist, anti-war, anti-capitalist, and just those talking points, even though it's a comedy show, is kind of what made it dangerous, I guess, in a way. And it sucks to think we live in a world now where you're really, even in the United States, you're not allowed to have those viewpoints, at least not on a large platform. And they just have to be knocked out. And I have never been censored at RT America. I was never told to say anything, never told I can't say anything. Ben Swan, who worked as a reporter and an anchor for a long time, tweeted out that he's worked at NBC, CBS, and Fox News and RT America, and the most freedom by far that he had was at RT.
Yeah.
So it's just laughable that, like, oh, RT is this draconian crazy place where they just tell everyone on screen to repeat lies. It's no, really, it's the reverse, that we had immense freedom there and CNN does not. So
I'd like to go back to the foreign agents issue because I think it's actually really important for people to understand what the government here in the US has been trying to do to people at outlets like RT America. And I'll put up this as an example. So this is, she has a very popular account. I have no idea how this woman ended up getting like nearly 500,000 people to follow her. But she wrote, to give you an idea of how huge this is, RT America was the single largest recipient of foreign agent designated funding in the United States from 2016 to 2021. And she puts foreign agent in quotes, which I suppose I should give her credit for that. And there's a good reason for why she's doing that, because it's bullshit to label it like that. And I'll get to that. But they received over $100 million from the Russian government during that time period. Okay, so I just want people to know that this, and by the way, she comes from, right now, she's working at a Pentagon funded Applied Research Laboratory for Intelligence and Security project at the University of Maryland on her postdoctoral. So just so you know where this is all coming from, she's funded by the Pentagon. And so we can take that down. The Committee to Protect Journalists, who I've been highly critical of because they won't label Julian Assange a jailed journalist in their index of people who are being kept imprisoned. They actually called this out because foreign news outlets in the United States have been forced to register as foreign agents. There's a state-funded CGTN from China that's been made to register.
I don't think BBC has it?
Nope.
Nope.
Of course not.
Nope.
No, it's not even. Yeah.
Deutsche Welle does not, from Germany. And then CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation from Canada, they don't have to register, but they did get to Al Jazeera. And you know what happens is people who were with these networks they had their press passes revoked and lost access to Capitol Hill.
Right.
So anyways, anything you want to say to that, Lee Camp, because this is actually a new development in our crackdown on press freedom, along with like the war on whistleblowers and other things that we can speak of from the Obama and Trump era.
The foreign agent registry is hilarious on so many levels. So that happened under Trump, but it was the Foreign Agent Act, or whatever the name of the act is, was created to have lobbyists for other countries have them be forced to register as lobbyists for other countries. And it was, I believe, created in the 60s. And it was initially meant for like, lobbyists for Israel to register as foreign agents. AIPAC never has, though. It never actually happened. And so AIPAC, the largest probably lobbying firm for another country in America, has never registered as foreign agents. But it was never intended and had never been used against media outlets because they're not like media outlets are not lobbyists. They're not sitting in the senator's office trying to tell them that they need to do this for their country or whatever for another country. And so it had never happened until RT. But they wanted to, to continue this McCarthyist push under Trump, the Russiagate bullshit and everything. By the way, I despise Trump, but Russiagate was hilarious and pathetic lies from our media. But so they forced they forced RT to register as foreign agent. They forced, several other networks from other countries, but of course don't force, like you said, the ones that are so-called allies, BBC, CBC, so many others. Those don't have to register as foreign agents. And they were told, RT America was told at the time, that this would not impact their ability to be at press events and interview politicians and things. And I think within a week afterwards, they revoked all the press credentials. So it served multiple purposes, but one of the key ones was to make sure that these outlets could not actually question our politicians or be in any of the rooms where there are big announcements being made, et cetera.
It also seems to be like a lot of these policies, whether from forcing RT to register as a foreign agent or whether it was slapping these labels on whether like on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, slapping these Russia affiliated or Russia controlled media labels onto not just the accounts of the actual outlets, but the last couple of weeks they started doing it to actual individuals who work for these outlets, which is just completely insane to mark an individual that way with the scarlet letter of Russia affiliated media. But a lot of this seems to have been designed also to deny RT and other outlets like it the staff they need to even function. Because, I know when there was the FARA registration, people quit because it's scary. It's like, I don't want to be considered working for a foreign agent. Like that's a scary label. You don't know, it sounds scary. You don't know, you might be scared of the repercussions of that. And then of course, watching people get labeled, nobody wants to get labeled. So I imagine there was probably people quitting over these things too, which may have played into shutting down. I don't know, Lee. That's like another theory that I've heard.
Well, yeah, I can tell you that many people did quit at RT America recently. And from this angle, I understand it in that I was at RT America for a very clear reason. I knew that I create a TV show that cannot be allowed on your mainstream airwaves. And this was the only place, at least on a large platform, that I could create such a show, especially an expensive show with, $1 million cameras and stuff like that. That was the only place I could do it. And so, and have so much freedom, the complete freedom to say what I wanted. And so I knew why I was there. And I think, all my correspondents, the people on camera knew why they were there. But for people that are just crew, just a camera guy or just someone, working in the makeup room, they just took a job. And so for them, it's not like they weren't there because they were like, well, I'm a leftist and this is the only place I can do leftist makeup. So, so it's understandable that when all this pressure comes down and they have family members and stuff buying into the garbage being sold by Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, whatever, and saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe you work for that horrific horror show over there," it makes sense that many would quit. However, if people say that RT shut down because they didn't have staff, I also think that is not true because they still had enough staff to put on shows. And even if they needed to, if the staff had gotten so low, they needed to decrease the number of shows, they still would have kept things going. They would have kept some things going, like let's say the news. Maybe they would have cut back to just being RT News instead of having shows like mine. But none of that happened. It was instantaneous, which again makes me think it came from somewhere else.
Something bigger was going on. Yeah.
And it's worth acknowledging that the decisions that have been taken, which are extraordinary, to engage in this censorship, to suspend access to Sputnik and RT and these other outlets in Europe first and foremost, and then now these sanctions that are having some impact, and the conditions, the Cold War atmosphere that it clearly led to the end of RT America here in the United States. It's being reciprocated by the Russian government in their country. I just would like to quickly read some of the outlets that have been affected. There are independent media that you could expect to face a crackdown, just like we're going to face a crackdown here for having having ideas, having views against our own government. But the BBC has had to pack it up. Radio Liberty, Voice of America, these are propaganda networks of the United States government that are funded. They put out U.S. state-funded media for a Russian audience. Deutsche Welle, we've already mentioned, doesn't have to register as a foreign agent in the U.S., but they have had to leave. And then, of course, BBC has actually ceased transmission into Russia. And then, like I said, there's a bunch of different independent groups that have done media that are under attack. But this is all I'm not saying it's entirely a response, because war results in its own level of internal repression. But a lot of this didn't happen until the West decided to come down on RT's networks.
Yeah, it's a dangerous tit for tat in many different realms, whether it be news networks or online internet freedom or cracking down on protesters or et cetera. But yeah, you see these things spiral out of control, which is why people are warning that, what's going on in Ukraine, both the US, UK, EU expansion that has threatened Russia's national security and Russia's invasion, like that puts us closer to nuclear war in a very severe way. And you have all